but welcome to the show. We're back again with another spooky week and another spooky season. And Battle's chapping it up. Hit that shit, bitch.
I need Burt's Bees. I don't have any. It's downstairs. I had to buy this because one day I forgot Burt's Bees. And
I use a Blistex because I'm black as shit. Anyway. Blistex and Carmex. Like, our people been keep holding it down for years. But yeah, so welcome to the show. We're doing another serial killer episode. And from the group chat, it all seems pretty heavy.
Yes.
Mine's a normal level of heavy this week.
Oh no, mine's pretty messed up. Battle, me and yours are kind of in the same realm of depravity, so...
Mine's heavy, but I don't know if he's really a serial killer.
Mine's an organization again, so...
I guess we'll get to that.
Yeah, so how about we do Rob Rat first?
Rob Rat.
And then we can do Kelly, then Battle, then me. I'll go last.
Okie dokie.
Sounds like a plan.
Take it away, Rob Rat.
So,
wait, this is Bruh's Murder, where we talk to
color.
And music from artists you probably never heard of before. Welcome to the show. So, we decided earlier that Robert is going to go first. So, take it away.
Okay, so late 90s, early 2000s. Before we start, have any of you guys seen The Wire, the TV show The Wire?
I refuse to see The Wire because I
really?
refuse to see Breaking Bad because people won't shut up about it.
I want to watch it, I just haven't.
I'm picky with shows and stuff. I like scary stuff, and it's really hard to get me to watch anything other than hentai, so...
Oh my god.
Scary stuff. I like horror.
The Wire is based in Baltimore, and the case we're talking about today is essentially some real life counterparts to some characters in the show, or depictions in the show. So there is used to be projects in Baltimore called the Terrace House, or Lexington Terrace. Terrace House, is a Japanese reality TV show. Ignore my dumb brain.
Oh, where that girl, she committed suicide, right? Because the whole country bullied her.
Probably.
The pro wrestler chick.
Terrace House is rough. It's like Big Brother, but Japanese.
Wait, is it reality?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, imagine Big Brother. It's just like Big Brother, but this one girl, she got portrayed
and there's
as
a dating element to it.
Mm.
Yeah, she got portrayed to be like a bitch on the show, and people online ripped her to shreds, and she committed suicide. It's pretty sad.
Yeah,
that's a bummer. But if you're looking for a place to listen to casual spoken Japanese, by actual people, not anime characters, Terrace House is great. Anyway, not talking about Japanese celebrity TV. The Lexington Terrace community was a project in Baltimore. It was demolished in the, I believe, early 90s, but that area still operated. So, like many projects in the 80s, 90s, was a open-air drug market. So, people from the city or from the suburbs would drive through there, people would run up to your car, sell you whatever you're trying to get, and then you leave. And all open-air drug markets, it became a violent crime area. The Lexington Terrace area specifically was run by a loose collection of dealers called the Lexington Terrace Boys. They were an organization they were dealers who had different suppliers, but they shared resources such as stash houses, firearms, and they did not directly compete with each other. There were some anecdotal stories of them breaking change for each other, or not really attacking.
What do you mean by breaking change?
So if someone shows up with a bill you can't break, you'd
the literal. Okay, right.
Yeah, making change while you're trying to deal. So stuff like that. So the Lexington Terrace Boys, while they worked together, it was more of a loose connection. However, there was a famous case of 3, showrunners for the Lexington Terrace Boys, who were eventually convicted and went to trial. And that was the United States versus Foster, Moses, and Taylor. So those are the three kind of big shots that we're going to be talking about today. They eventually were connected to 6 different murders. So kind of like how we talked previously with the Savage drug ring, a lot of these murders were, not directly tied to these 3 people, but because they were committed under the name of the Lexington Terrace Boys and by command of these 3 people, they are held culpable for that. So the 3 of them were Aaron Foster, also known as Little Aaron, Keon Moses, also known as Black, and Michael Taylor, also known as Mike Mumbles. At the time of their conviction, they were all between the ages of 18 and 20.
That explains the names.
When they were running a drug ring. So this kind of got picked up in the news a little bit because people are like, well, okay, if these 18, 19-year-olds are running this drug ring of the Lexington Terrace Boys, how old are their soldiers? How old are their dealers? And much of the people involved are very young. The United States district attorney had briefly parked a surveillance van on the Lexington Terrace community and was just videotaping the day in, day out dealing operations. So they had more than enough evidence to convict them on intent to distribute. They caught them with, I think, 50 grams of crack cocaine, which, because of the 1 in 100 rules, that's enough to put you away forever. But there was because it's a community of people, there was children walking around, stuff like that, which was just all more used to paint a picture of this kind of destroyed section of the city. Because in most projects, people are forced to do crime to make ends meet. And kind of how we've talked about in the past, the crack epidemic in the United States is the direct result of government interference. I was talking to a friend recently about, crack epidemic stuff, and we kind of summed it up as it was the only way the U.S. government could fund a foreign war with taxes, but only tax poor black people. And we're getting a little sidetracked, but the Lexington Terrace Boys were teenagers who were eventually convicted life sentences for those 6 murders. The Lexington Terrace Boys were eventually convicted of intent to distribute, possession of firearms, brandishing a weapon, and those 6 murders that they were tied to. But again, they didn't directly kill those people. And also witness tampering and murdering a witness, which is something we also saw in the Savage drug ring. Another kind of weird aspect of the evidence gathering process is the videos that the district attorney gathered and played in court to help convict these people. Did not show all of them. Some of them weren't even in the terrorist community at the time, they were in prison. But those videos were still used to color the jury and convict them, which is a little strange. Yeah, on their appeal, it literally just said, and various related substantive offenses. So anything they could categorize under selling crack. But the reason I like all of these cases is, for whatever reason, the media at the time really painted all of these people as morally corrupt, morally failing, demons, evil people. And it's only now that we can look back on it and say these people are results directly of destroyed communities. How do people make gang ties when they're not from a community? Well, they go to prison and they meet those people, or they're forced into crime as a result of need. Financial need in a community is solved by crime for many people. Which, I don't mean that as a way to hand wave away their crimes. Obviously, I'm glad these people were put in prison. They killed people. They got people addicted to crack. But I want us to keep in mind the context under which people commit these crimes. It's kind of like people who don't have the avenues everyone else does in the United States because they grew up in the projects. And it's sex work, selling drugs, being an enforcer for someone who sells drugs, were, in their community, legitimate forms of bettering themselves. They're still incarcerated. I believe they are out of appeals at this point. But another interesting aspect of this case was the semi-peaceful coexistence that all these loose collection dealers had, which I'm not sure why the district attorney included. They talked about that a fair amount, about oh yeah, they they share guns and stash houses, and like they have different suppliers, and they sell different like brands. Like they all use different colored toppers for their vials, so that people like had a color association. Like, oh, I buy pink vials, I buy white vials, those sorts of things.
That's interesting.
So like they're direct competition with each other, and in any other neighborhood that we see in the crack epidemic, that typically meant like all-out war. You know, like Caboni Savage was like killing other groups. Mm-hmm. But for whatever reason, the Lexington Terrace boys maintain this like semi-peaceful existence with each other. The district attorney did state that there was one rule when it came to the Lexington Terrace boys, and that was either you belonged there or you didn't. And that was their kind of decision point of like, you no longer belong here, and they like either bounced you from the area or killed you. And they use that on dealers, on enforcers, on customers, you know, because they knew the people in the area. They knew people who bought from them regularly. So you either belonged there or you didn't.
It's like an ecosystem.
Yeah, absolutely. And the terrace, the Lexington Terrace projects, when they were demolished, everyone was kind of celebrating it. They're like, yeah, the drugs are going to go away. The projects don't exist anymore. And then, you know, naturally, all the people that still like lived there were just like, okay, now we live in the surroundings of this demolished project, and we're going to still continue all the local economy stuff. So it was a solution thought up by someone who didn't think about it for very long. Because naturally, the building's the easy thing. You know, you burn down the haunted house and the ghosts go away.
Yeah,
you know?
That's like the foundation's still there, bro.
Yeah. Those people, they don't stop existing. You know, the damage done to that community is still going to play itself out through these, like, generational scars that become drug rings.
It was like always treating the symptom instead of the cause.
Yeah.
I think that's something that we're, like, accustomed to doing, though.
Oh, definitely.
It's just easier, like, quicker to, like, polish up the appearance and, like, get into the root of the issue.
Well, and the thing, too, is that if you treat the symptom and not the cause, like, it's one of those things where, like, you have to admit a certain amount of wrongdoing yourself.
Yeah.
To, like, address it, so.
Humility
and nobody
is
wants
difficult,
to do that.
No.
Right?
No. Well, I mean, it's cathartic to send a bunch of drug dealers to prison. It's cathartic to put away a murderer or to demolish a building, because then you can.
It's a very good story.
Yeah, you can go to the community and say, like, hey, I don't know what that other mayor did. He was, like, trying to pay teachers more money, thinking that would help anything. I put Caboni Savage in jail. I put the Lexington Terrace boys in jail. And, you know, it looks like you're doing a lot, but really you have helped nothing. And if anything, you've made those people more well-connected, and they can continue to commit crime, just like we saw with Caboni Savage. While he was in prison is when he killed the most people under his orders.
All right, Kelly, you want to take it away?
Sure. So I decided to cover Swift Runner, who was a Cree native in Alberta, Canada in the late 1800s. He was generally well-liked in his community. He had been a trapper, hunter, and guide for the local police. He was married and had 5 children. So there was a noted change in Swift Runner after he had been spending too much time with white men, having access to whiskey. And over time, he developed a dependence on alcohol and was said to be a mean drunk. In fact, according to one source, he and his family were ostracized because of it and had moved further out from the tribe into the wilderness.
So he turned into Kyle, basically.
Yeah, punching walls and drinking Monster.
He just got drunk and started punching walls.
Punching holes in trees, yeah.
And they're like, bro, you gotta go.
Speeding around in his Subaru.
Sad thing, I drink Monsters, I have a Subaru, and I punch holes in my wall.
Oh, well.
I have small hands. You see those little dots on my wall?
Yeah,
those are all my
finger holes.
It's like, get your hand game up, bro.
I just
Melinda's like shaking her
wall.
head in the background.
See these
Jesus
little
Christ.
Hey, I was a very, like, edgy emo kid. Monster was, like, the cool energy drink.
Bottoms up.
You're just pissing hot
I'm not a
yellow.
fan of Monster. I drank a coffee one doing an overnight.
Oh,
Couldn't
coffee
concentrate
Monster.
and couldn't sleep.
I can't drink a whole Monster. I like take sips out of it, and then I'll put it in the fridge, and Melinda's like, it fucking stinks in this fridge, like monster. I hate the smell of it.
Nah, you haven't lived till you've been overseas and had nothing but ribbits.
Ribbits? Yes.
I don't know what that is.
I know, ribbits. You can get them at the dollar store for $1. It's like this size.
Little can, but they will fuck you up with caffeine.
I'm good with my 1 cup of coffee. Mine had CBD in it this morning, but I don't think it does anything.
Are you high right now, Kelly?
Yes.
Kelly.
But anyway, so the winter of 1878 to 1879 turned out to be a very difficult one, and by spring there were many rumors circulating through the community when people were no longer seeing his wife and children around. Eventually, Swiftrunner did go to the police to report his family's death. He said that they had died due to the harsh conditions and starvation. When police went back to his camp with him, the scene painted a very different story. There were bones laid everywhere, some even drained of marrow.
What? Human bones?
Yes.
In the chocolate?
Bones in the chocolate. Yes, the bones of his family.
What? And there's no marrow in them?
Mm-hmm.
You already just scooped it out.
Implication of cannibalism.
You don't scoop it out, you suck it out like...
With a nice Chianti.
Yeah, those are the boba straws of nature.
The
The forbidden straw. The shit.
But he was eventually found guilty of cannibalistic murder, and his case has been attributed to the Wendigo psychosis for the past 140 plus years since that took place. Yes, so I just wanted to go into it a little bit. A Wendigo is part of the folklore of indigenous people from North America, including but not limited to the Algonquins, Cree, Ojibwe, and Assiniboine tribes. The lore varies, but a Wendigo is usually characterized as an evil spirit with cannibalistic bloodlust. A human can be possessed by one, or if on their own engage in cannibalism, can themselves turn into one. They're described as very tall, gaunt creatures that supposedly grow in proportion to their meals so that they are never satisfied. So they serve as a warning against eating other humans, even in severe cases for survival. They are associated with famine that usually comes along with the dark and cold winter months, especially up north. The existence of Wendigo psychosis has been hotly debated in more modern times. And just as a quick definition, Wendigo psychosis is a severe culture-bound syndrome occurring among northern Algonquin natives living in Canada and the northeastern United States. The syndrome is characterized by delusions of becoming possessed by a flesh-eating monster and is manifested in symptoms including depression, violence, a compulsive desire for human flesh, and sometimes actual cannibalism. So I also figured that maybe if you guys wanted to discuss it a little bit about whether or not, because it's been, like I said, hotly contested about whether it exists.
I did read an article about cannibalism, and it's if you're hungry enough, you're starving, I forget, there's a chemical in your brain that kind of inhibits certain factors in your head. So some things that you don't consider something that you would eat, if you're starving, that's now an option for you. So in a lot of those cases, there's one of the arguments, when people are starving, they turn to cannibalism. It's they're at that point of desperation where they're fuck it. Your brain's just fuck it, eat. We need some calories.
Oh yeah, the whole Donner Party. I just think it's interesting to, the fact that this particular psychosis is characterized by their folklore. Because they say generally that, Wendigo psychosis only is attributed to indigenous people in North America. But it's less so now, with urbanization and things like that. But, I think it's a possibility that, your culture and your lore can affect, the mental disorders or things like that.
Right.
In your community.
It makes me think of, people who think they get, I forget what it's called, the werewolf delusions, where
being a lunatic.
I think that's where it comes from. I don't remember.
Yeah,
but
because
the like association with the full
moon
moon as a trigger.
Or you mean like
for
lichens? Lycanthropy?
Well, I mean, in folklore, yes, but like people with actual mental illness, like bipolar
they used to
disorder,
associate
things
that
like
with like, there being a full moon.
Yeah, because you have that like cultural background of like, hey, the full moon turns werewolves. I think I'm a werewolf. My brain is going to treat that as a trigger now to put me in this thought cycle where I like commit violence.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you think about it too, the thing that it made me think of is like religious fanaticism, especially within like Christianity. You know, like, I mean, if you think of like the idea of Carrie White's mother, in Carrie, the movie.
Yeah.
The way that she's so intense that like she abuses her child because of her beliefs. Ow.
That or people who do self-inflicted stigmata. Like that's a very specific injury.
What's
like,
that?
Stigmata is like
holes in your hands, like you're being crucified.
Like Jesus.
Or like crown of thorns.
Or like, what's it called? Like self-flagellation, where they like take the thing and like hit themselves on the back in Catholicism.
Yeah, they do that.
So I mean, that totally makes sense to me. That like you take the same mental illness and you put it in different cultures, it's going to manifest in different ways.
Yeah.
So like, we're looking at a person who was like self-isolating, who was having substance abuse issues, and then it culminated in family annihilation. Like that's not a crazy story. And there's kind of like this weird, like almost like cultural racism that gets attached to it by like making it like a special like Wendigo thing,
Yeah.
Which like I understand because he may have actually believed he was becoming a Wendigo or that he was.
And a lot of those folklore stories really come from a place of like, hey, don't do this because this is not good. We're not cool with this.
Yeah, I think that's where a lot of lore comes from.
The taboos of your culture, yeah, 100%.
Like you see that in like Christianity too.
So I mean, for a culture like so against like human like consumption and like cannibalism, that I always found it very strange that the like symbolic eating of flesh and blood in like communion, like that's strange to me.
Well, I guess it's different if it's the body and blood of Christ, like you're a deity.
He tastes different. Yeah. He's wine and bread.
The other white meat.
The Eucharist. The other white meat.
What else was I going to say? There's something else I wanted to add to it. Oh,
I did watch a documentary too about a tribe in Amazon that still eats people. And someone went and interviewed them a couple years ago. And in an interview, they said that people taste like pork.
Yeah.
That's
why it's called long pig.
Yeah.
Well, and it's actually not super uncommon. We actually see it a fair amount. Like, there's some like funeral practices, like you are cremated and then your ashes are mixed into soup and then like the tribe shares you. Like that is a form of cannibalism that's like part of a funerary practice.
Yeah.
And stuff like that. Or like some people use it to like purge evil from a community. Like you eat the witch.
Which
that's a thing that happens.
And another concept of it that like the whole thing too with like certain cannibalism is that like if you eat the brain or the brain stem, like that can actually cause another form of like insanity, I believe.
Mm-hmm. You can get sick from that.
Yeah.
I think it's like the prions in the meat or something.
Yeah.
I want to say it's the Fijians, but somebody Google check it while you're listening to this because they also have a similar practice of like eating your enemies to like absorb their power.
That's not healthy.
Yeah.
Oh, same with like in Europe.
Fijian cannibalism.
But the one thing I was going to say too that was interesting also about his whole case is that like it's one thing like to eat another person when you are in survival mode, like when you're trying to like survive.
Yeah.
But they were saying that like I think there was emergency food supply 25 miles from where his camp was.
So he had options.
Yeah. So, like, it wasn't necessarily that he needed to eat them, but also this is, like, information that's been handed down from a much different time, so. Yeah, I was, like, Googling it, because, like, 25 miles sounds, like, pretty far, but I guess you can get there in, like, a day and a half.
If you're running, you can get there in, like, 4 or 5 hours.
Yeah.
But we're not all battle witches.
I'm curious if there's like any nutritional value from eating people. Like,
I
get that they.
I mean, absolutely.
It probably depends on the person how much nutrition you're gonna get from, you know.
Just all
If
gristle.
you just eat someone who's just pure muscle, you ain't getting much from muscle.
True.
Not a good
Like, out of all of
marbling.
us, I'd probably eat Robert last.
Yay, thank you.
I don't know who it,
He's my biggest threat.
he's gonna eat me first.
He's the one who probably take me down, so I gotta like knock him out first.
Okay.
And that fear
If we
for the
all
rest of you.
ever get caught in like an avalanche or like on a plane goes down on our way to like CrimeCon or something, we eat
All gonna
Andre
have
first.
knives.
We all get
Oh,
together and we take out Andre.
And as soon as we crash, like 10 minutes later, you're gonna see me just gnawing on Baasik.
And he's
10
not even
minutes.
hungry. He's just like
Not even waiting.
I'm
We
really
still
not-
have like peanuts from the plane. Nope. Going after battle.
immediately
Take it.
gets rescued 20 minutes later. Like,
Come on, what?
I was hungry, sir. You had peanuts. You
I
had
just
the free
want a
biscuit
little
option.
nibble. Speaking of which,
Here's my
I just
chance.
watched the movie Raw.
Yes.
Raw. Did I watch that?
It's a French language film.
It's on
Very-
Netflix.
I have
very
not watched
fun.
it. I have not watched it. I
On that
wanted to watch
spooky
it.
note, we're gonna go to a small break.
And now, a short commercial break.
All right, and we're back. Mine is about Eddie Lee Mosley, who was an American serial killer and a rapist who murdered at least 8 women in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, between 1973 and 1987. But he raped a lot more than he murdered. We'll get into it. It's pretty insane how much he got away with.
But first, sorry, I was gonna go first just because I have like a trigger warning about the whole rape and sexual assault thing.
I'm gonna say it now because mine involves that too.
Okay, yeah. So before we dive into our cases, I just want to preface it that they're give you all a trigger warning because both of our cases discuss rape and assault, which I know a lot of the things that we discuss are pretty morbid and could be obscene, but rape and sexual assault have been a thing forever and is on the rise all over the place. So if you don't want to hear about this stuff, please just go to the next episode or stop listening here.
I did not know that. That's not.
Yeah,
it's on the rise.
Yeah, I mean, look at USC, University of Southern California. They're in trouble right now. One of their fraternities got shut down because there was a whole thing. Like, this happened in the last like 24 hours.
Jesus.
There's a whole thing with this fraternity. Not saying that all fraternities are bad, but like a lot of
They
bad
don't have
things happen
great
with.
reputations.
Yeah. This fraternity was like drugging people with like their drinks and stuff at parties and sexual assaulting a lot of women, and that's just women that are coming forward, and that's not the women and men that are not coming forward because there's a lot of humility associated around that. But
something like that also recently
Too,
happened at the
if it's
University of Delaware.
Going
like this-
up. Sorry.
Sorry, yeah, but this girl got like assaulted and like punched in the face.
Yeah.
And they just had I seen it on TikTok. My partner said it to me. They just had like a protest outside their fraternity.
I think I saw that
And,
too.
The guys were on the porch like laughing about it and shit because the
Yeah.
dude like got off. He's like home now, and everyone's like, "Why hasn't he been kicked out of school yet?"
And they're trying to shut down the whole fraternity too, just
As
because
they
like
should.
because they had. I think it was FSU. I don't remember where exactly, but I remember seeing this girl's TikTok about it specifically, and like even in their like, I don't know what it is, like their handbook or whatever, the boys have to like sign before they like join. It has specific things in there about like sexual assault or like how they treat
Jesus
people.
Christ.
yeah,
Yeah.
So, I mean, so that's one thing to keep in mind when we talk about, like, if the statistics are showing, like, a positive trend in rape, like, it's continuing to go up, that may be as a result of more people feeling comfortable coming forward about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And or our understanding of, like, consent and definition of rape is expanding as well.
Yeah. Like recently I heard a case about someone who did a thing called stealthing. They just made that illegal in California, and I didn't know what stealthing was.
I don't know what
It is. Do you want to go for it?
Oh yeah. So basically, it means like if you're having consensual sex with somebody, but you tell them that you're going to use protection, and then you just don't, and they're under the guise that you're using protection the whole time. That's stealthing because like they were consenting to protected sex with a condom and not like, and then you misled them saying that you're going to use protection and then you didn't.
And I think they should even expand that further where like if you specifically have to lie to someone to have sex with them in any capacity, then like I think that
kind of
fall under coercive sex.
Yeah.
Because then they would not have had sex with you.
Yeah, there's a YouTuber who's just got like, he's getting sued for that, rightfully so, because this girl he was dating was like, hey, you stealthed me. I didn't consent to like not using the condom. You could have gave me something. Which is 100% valid and fair.
Yeah.
So and even conditions changed that led to their consent. Like, yeah.
So, sorry for the tangent. We'll get back to Eddie Lee Mosley because it doesn't get better. But so he was born as a third child out of 10 kids in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. At his birth, he had a real bad respiratory disease as a child, and this caused him a slew of other birth issues and also like mental defects. So at an early age, he showed an intellectual disability, mental instability, and also had amnesia problems, which I didn't know that like kids could just suffer from amnesia, but apparently if you're a sick enough kid, you can suffer from amnesia. So in 1960, at the age of 13, he was forced to leave school after like getting held back into third grade several times. And he just got kicked out of school. In his teen years, he lived in poor conditions and showed signs of having an antisocial personality. Now, not having any formal education, he was forced to engage in like skilled labor and like petty crime. Soon, due to financial difficulties, he leaned more into crime other than like having a normal skilled labor job, because if you're poor, uneducated, and in a poor area, how else are you going to make money? Not an excuse, but it's like you can see how someone can be pushed towards a life of crime. So now in 1965, he had been arrested already 9 times on various charges, including indecent behavior, robbery, assault, attempted rape, and murder. He spent 5.5 years in prison and almost 6 years in 5.5 years in prison and also 6 different psychiatric wards. So the reason you'll see this a lot throughout his history. He'll like go to prison and then get out because he's getting switched from prison to a psych ward, and then released from the psych ward, and then back to prison, back to psych ward, and then released again. So now, between 1971 and 1973, almost 150 rapes of girls and women were recorded in the Fort Lauderdale area where he lived. In all the cases, the perpetrator was described as a young, tall black man with an athletic build and a scar on his left cheek. Under the threat of physical violence, he would lure these women and girls to isolated areas and choke and sexually abuse them. Now, on July 23rd, 1973, 3 rape victims identified him as the assailant. And it was like basically just due to his description. He was a very like standout, a very easily to identify person.
Yeah, a facial scar, that takes you out of a crowd immediately.
Yeah, being a tall dude with a facial scar, people are going to point you out. And those 3 women pointing him out correlated to the other people who came forward with composite sketches. And they were just like putting 2 and 2 together, like this is the same guy who's raping all these women. So, so after his arrest, his photographs was shown to other victims, resulting in 40 different women identifying him as their rapist. During this period, Eddie was also the primary suspect in a rape and murder of 2 young black girls in Fort Lauderdale, and he got dropped off of that case due to insufficient evidence, and he also couldn't find like the body or the weapons.
Dang.
So, however, following a mental evaluation, he was found to be clinically insane and was ordered to get sent to another Florida state hospital where he spent only 5 years. So for 40 some odd rapes and maybe more, and possibly 2 murders, he just spent 5 years in a psych ward.
That is crazy to me. How low sexual assault or sexual violence is viewed.
That's going to be the biggest takeaway from this.
Insane to me.
You have damn near 150 women saying that this guy raped me. 40 confirmed to say that this guy raped them, and he just spends 5 years away. He's clearly a danger to women in society.
I was gonna say that. What was the time period?
Between 1970 and 1973 is when the rapes were all happening.
Jesus Christ, that's a lot in 3 years.
Mm-hmm. Yes, insane.
So, but it doesn't end there. So during his imprisonment, no other similar rapes or murders had occurred in the area. So while he was in prison that whole time, nothing else was happening in Fort Lauderdale. So it's obviously that they got the right guy if no one else is being assaulted for the next 5 years. So that Mosley was transferred from South Florida State Hospital to Pembroke Pines. After completing a 5-month treatment course in that summer of the year, he was deemed cured and no longer a danger to society and was released. But he continued his treatment by doing an outpatient thing where he would go see a psychiatrist every now and again just to check up on him. And then he also moved back to his parents' house in Fort Lauderdale. So he just went back to the same area where he was committing these crimes. So over the next 7 months, 7 young girls were found raped and murdered in that same area.
Jesus Christ, dude.
And Eddie quickly became the prime suspect again, because obviously things were silent when you were gone, and then when you come back, all this happens. Mm-hmm. So in early 1980, fearful of the increased attention of law enforcement upon him, he left the city. He moved back to Lakeland with his grandmother, and not long after, he became the prime suspect again in the disappearance of 2 girls, Ida Eagles and Letha Mae Williams. They went missing shortly after his arrival to the town, and Mosley was arrested, interrogated, but released, as the victims' bodies once again could not be located. He returned to Fort Lauderdale in April 12, 1980, where he was arrested for attempting to rape another young girl. So, literally wherever this guy would go, no matter what town he was in, he was just a danger to women.
I mean, that's a part of prison we don't really talk about, or criminal justice. Is people argue about rehabilitation versus punishment, but there's also the aspect of community protection.
Yeah.
Getting those dangerous people away from vulnerable people.
And not being able to go back to the same place where you victimize people. Yeah. You just threw him back into his hunting ground. He knows where to go. He knows the spots where to go. He knows what to do.
Right.
So now he was found guilty and sentenced to 15 years imprisonment. Now while Mosley was in prison, the skeletal remains of Ida and Williams were discovered near Lakeland.
What the fuck?
While incarcerated, so they finally found the bodies after they imprisoned him. So now, while he was in prison, he obviously was not a model prisoner. He exhibited aggressive behavior, often physical and sexual, towards other prisoners. And one occasion, even fighting the guards and threatening to set the whole place on fire. His family later hired a lawyer who filed an appeal to overturn his verdict in a new trial, citing the incompetence of his previous lawyer, who hadn't filed for a psychological examination of his client. But it's what would that do for him? He's already committed so many heinous crimes. Yeah. We know that something's mentally wrong with him, but obviously leaving him in psych wards hasn't been beneficial towards him or anyone else in the community at large.
Yeah.
You wouldn't be there for your family, but come on. So now in January 1984, Mosley came under police suspicion again after the bodies of a 36-year-old woman and a 36 and 54-year-old woman were found in northwestern Fort Lauderdale, and they were raped and killed via strangulation. Now in 1984, he was arrested for raping a 22-year-old woman. At trial, he pled not guilty, claiming that the sexual assault was consensual, and he offered them drugs. And his lawyer managed to actually successfully portray that one incident as a consensual sexual encounter because drugs were involved, even though the woman
The
claimed
most evil person in the world. Like,
he's a shitty lawyer.
oh.
And it's the same lawyer that got him a reduced sentence from those last trials because he only spent 3 years in prison for those last handful of things. And he got back out and committed these other crimes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so in October of that same year, he was acquitted and released on those other 2 charges that he caught. And after committing 2 more murders and also Fort Lauderdale again, he was the sheriff's department was contacted by the FBI, which basically cracked down on him and has in fact followed him in cases around him, and were able to connect him to 24 rapes and a strangulation of a specific woman who was connected to a different case that we covered forever ago. That they thought that this guy did it. He was wrongfully convicted. Turns out it was Eddie Mosley the whole time.
Jesus.
So basically, he just kept getting hit with murder cases, but then kept getting off somehow, or kept getting reduced sentences, and then just going back out and doing it again.
And
so
they're
now,
not noticing this pattern. They're just
a lot of it seems to be different police stations not talking to each other, and passing information around, even though it's literally just Fort Lauderdale and Lakeland. And
don't
he's
they
just
have
bouncing back and forth, committing crimes in both.
files on specific? I guess I don't know.
I mean, in the 70s, yeah, they didn't really talk to each other yet.
So now he's continuing to get off and shit. The FBI is now watching him. Let's jump to 1987, where he was arrested for theft. And by this time, his blood group matched with the semen samples taken from the bodies of multiple different murder victims. And it was found to be a match, obviously, with all of them. Eddie showed evidence to his involvement in numerous crimes committed over almost 2 decades, all committed in a city near his home of interrogation. Mosley tried to make up an alibi with detailed descriptions of basically tried to lie, but his lies were bad because it will always circle around to him being in the same area as these bodies were found. He tried to give a testimony, but they began to mess up his testimony, getting dates, geography data, even seasons wrong. In the end, he confessed to the murder of only 2 women, and he was charged with those in 1987. But several other sex workers also came out in the area saying that he also raped them. But they didn't really go that far because at the time no one really respected sex workers enough to give their testifications any validity. Now during this trial, he was given various tests for IQ tests, and he scored a 51, and they deemed him incompetent to stand trial. And he was just sentenced, instead of prison time this time again, sentenced back to another state hospital.
Because that worked so well.
Yeah,
the first
so
50 times.
Yeah, after all these murders and shit like that, he's still just not getting the proper due. So for the remainder of his life, Mosley had been shuffled between various clinics and mental hospitals. And in 2000, his saliva and blood sample were taken for DNA testing again. This is kind of when cold cases were being reopened with new technology. It was proven that he was connected to at least 7 more murders, and he was also charged with the death of a 15-year-old girl, proving someone that we covered on the show before, Jerry Frank Townsend. It helped prove his innocence.
Wow.
Yeah, and we covered him ages ago, but yeah, so after some newer technology came out, they were able to free someone else because this person did it. He was once again arrested in 1979 in Miami for raping a different girl again. So now, fast forward to the year 2000s, he is still suffering from, his mental illnesses. He was transferred to Sunland Center in Florida, and in the spring of 2020, he was diagnosed with pneumonia and moved to Jackson Hospital, where he died on May 28th, 2020 at 73. And shortly before his death, he also tested positive for coronavirus. So that may have added to, may have pushed him along into dying. Yeah, and that's the long, disgusting, and unbelievable case of Lee Mosley, where he kept murdering and raping women over 2 decades and kept getting off and being allowed to continue to do it.
Well, who were the majority of his victims?
Black women.
Yeah, that's what I
Black women
figured.
and black girls. Just researching that one, that was like kind of, it was like really hard to script out because there was just so many victims, and it's like,
Well, that's the thing is, like, it's hard enough to get like police to believe rape in the first place, so let alone like the other factors in there of race and all that doesn't help.
Not to mention, like, in the 80s, that's when, like, the crack epidemic was, like, really hitting the black community, like, really hard. So I talk about that in my case, about what happens with people that are raped and they try to say, hey, this is what's going on, or, like, they find crack in their system and just like, okay, I can't believe you because you're under the influence, or you've been under the influence recently of crack.
And the other thing that it kind of brings up is like the level of accountability in a person when they have established like mental illnesses. Like, we know that those kinds of things, I mean, there's a lot of things where like you can't do certain heinous things if something is not wrong.
yeah.
You know?
100%.
But like, at what point, like, where does the accountability fall? Like, how much do we take it into account, mental illness versus like this person still knows that this is a wrong thing to do?
Yeah.
So,
Well, and then we kind of go back to like the community protection aspect of it.
Yeah.
Like, you know, even if this is a result of like mental illness, I mean, that just means the care that is required for your mental illness may
Has
also
increased,
mean some either imprisonment or like denial of access to public
Yeah.
resources.
But that'll take it away, my friend.
Again, trigger warning, everyone that's listening. I get it, it's tough. But our few moments of being uncomfortable about talking about something that's really real shouldn't matter, because things like this should be talked about and awareness should be brought to them. And with that being said, my case is about a person named Miacheal Hughs, who was eventually convicted and sentenced to life without parole for his heinous crimes against women. Hughes was born in Michigan in 1958. However, at a young age, he moved and grew up in Southern California, specifically Pasadena, California. And prior to moving to Pasadena, before his 5th birthday, his father actually left him and his family, which is really crazy because he did an interview and said that his father was a really nice man and stuff like that. Prior to his enlistment in the Navy, because he is a Navy veteran, he grew up in a pretty bad household. It has been said, and he said, that his mother was single and abusive and was an alcoholic. And according to an interview conducted by Unforbidden Truth, someone on YouTube that does like these cases, his mother was a lot more strict with him and was a lot more abusive to him relative to his sister. And the biggest thing that he took away from and that he feared for himself as a kid and growing up was that he was physically abused and beaten, and that was very detrimental to him. Which I'm not trying to give him a scapegoat or anything like that, but this, I think it's important to look at why people do the things that they do, and we've talked about it before.
context
When people try to
matters.
justify beating kids. It's
Yeah.
so weird to me.
Kills me every time.
'Cause it's a
If
pattern,
if
right?
you even begin to say the words, I turned out okay,
It's like,
You-
obviously you
you're
did
a
because you want to
clown.
beat up a toddler.
you're
Yeah.
literally just describing the cycle of abuse.
Well, yeah, like you turned out okay in spite of the fact that your parents hate you, not because of it.
Well, you turned out okay, but you still became a person who thought it's okay to hit kids.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
that's him.
that's like something like for me, I grew up in a very I was taken away as a kid because there was there's domestic violence in my house, and before even thinking about having a kid, like for me personally, like I did a lot of therapy because I have a lot of daddy issues, and it was very scary, and it's something that like I had to talk about a lot, especially with Melinda, that I'm afraid that I might do something because I was abused, and just because like I survived domestic violence doesn't mean like I I feel like I'm more susceptible to continuing that pattern. However, for me, I try to intervene, and I still talk about like these things. Like it makes me nervous, and like Melinda and I have a very good pattern. Like if one of us is frustrated, we step in and say like, okay, I'm going to take it, go chill out, like, because this is not good that you're upset. So we try to work in tandem, and I think that's something that we're going to continue to do. But
it's so
obviously,
awesome. That's
yeah,
like,
and I think
that's like the dream strategy for someone who's coming out of that scenario is get therapy and get a partner who can hold you accountable.
And I think the most important thing too is like your awareness of it.
Absolutely.
I definitely don't want to continue that pattern, because my dad also experienced that, which is, I think, the reason why he was like that with us. And I don't want to be like that. And I'm glad that I have Melinda, and I'm glad that like I took it upon myself to get help. And I know that's not the case for everyone else and other people that have to experience it, especially in the Black community, where sometimes mental health isn't taken as serious, and it's tough. And I feel with so many people that don't want to get help. I understand that, and it takes time, but it's okay.
Yeah, on my list of 3 things that is for everyone: feminism, therapy, and lieutenant. For everyone.
Yes. So, he grew up being physically abused, and it was detrimental to him. However, this does not excuse any type of the crimes that he committed. Discussing his background and other backgrounds on this helps draw a picture on why people are more likely to commit the types of crimes that they do, because there's definitely a pattern. So along with having a bad childhood and other patterns that define people that do these things, one thing that we talk about often is mental trauma. And according to Hughes himself, he was hospitalized at a young age for having mental breaks or mental breakdowns. So I think he was under the age of 10 when he actually was hospitalized, because life was very difficult for him. So again, was he destined to fall into a life of hurting others because he himself was hurt? I don't know. Maybe. But at some point, there has to be some type of accountability for our action. On January 22nd of 1986, a young 15-year-old girl named Yvonne Coleman was leaving her boyfriend's house. While on the way home, sometime between leaving her boyfriend's house and going home, she crossed paths with Hughes. He sexually assaulted her, he raped her, and strangled her in or around Inglewood Park. He was never found, however, her body was found. Months later, in May of that year, another 15-year-old girl was found strangled and had signs of being raped and sexually assaulted. Her name was Vernell Williams. Fast forward to August 30th of 1990, the body of Deanna Wilson, who was 30 years old, was found raped and strangled. And something to realize around this time, around these murders that were happening, especially like I said earlier in the late 80s, the crack epidemic was running rampant in Southern California. So some of the women that were found could have been possibly labeled as victims in that epidemic, because crack was going around, and unfortunately it hit my community very deeply. Like, Black people, Black women were being fed this shit at high rates. So according to Thomas Watkins of the Associated Press, when talking to the homicide detective Clifford Shepard, he said that many of the women that were found in these areas had cocaine in their system. However, he was not explicit in saying that these women that were found during these murders that Hughes had committed had cocaine in their systems. It was just something that he stated. So July 3rd, 2008, homicide detectives were able to link his DNA to the victim's DNA, to new victims' DNA, using new technology. So this coincided with what Andre was talking about, like new technology that helped bring more cases to put these murders on other people, on these different murderers. And I know I talked about 2008, but I think it's important to talk about it, because more bodies were found, which helped keep him in prison. Because he was first arrested in December of 1993, and by 1998, he was found guilty of murder, and he was convicted and found guilty of murder and got life in prison without the possibility of parole. 10 years after his conviction and sentencing, that's when investigators were able to link him to at least 4 more victims with that new technology. They think that he had more victims, though, because he lived in different places, because remember I said he was in the Navy and he was stationed in different states, and they believe that he killed and raped and killed more women, but at that time they couldn't link it. However, things were happening around the same time. So the big takeaway from this is that yes, mental health is an issue. Sexual assault is on the rise. It happens daily, but also with him being a Navy veteran, it also shows that given the right circumstances, people can do horrible things. And just because someone has some type of status in their communities, whatever they do, their profession, doesn't mean that they are absolved and they can't do these things, because people are susceptible to it. Everyone is susceptible to it given the right circumstances.
And sometimes people directly search for those positions of power so that they can commit such acts.
Absolutely. But that's my case. Sorry.
I mean, no, it was...
Sorry.
Well, no, and like, those are important cases to talk about. Like, when we're talking about, like, crimes against people of color that, like, get overlooked.
And also, these are important.
Is huge on that list.
These are important conversations to have, especially like when we take into consideration like your environment, your mental health, you know, all these different kinds of things as far as like why people commit crimes.
Yeah.
So
that's nice.
Sometimes we get uncomfortable, but that's okay.
Yeah.
Got to work through the uncomfortability, if that's a word. I don't know.
Absolutely.
Well, we're gonna make it one.
Yes.
But yeah, any other thoughts? That was our episode, but any thoughts on the cases, anybody?
I like to see, like, kind of in all of our cases, we were different time periods, and like the technology and like science of the time kind of came into play, which is interesting. And I think the biggest improvements we've seen in policing are not a result of like super cops solving crimes. It's a result of like, oh, we now have a national database. Oh, we actually tested the rape kits.
We can make communities more aware of what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I feel like that's a big thing too.
That's something I dislike that I've seen a lot of like crime documentaries and stuff. Is they have like specific detectives who like they're celebrities, like
Joe Kenda.
That they like pull in all the time, and they're like, tell us about that one case again, and it comes back to their like this moment of genius where I saw all the pieces coming together. Like,
yeah, I'm not going to applaud you for doing your job, sir.
Well, and like, I'm so glad that you helped put this person in prison, but if we had a better structure around it, we wouldn't rely on genius of one person to figure it out. That's not a good thing.
Well, that's the thing, too, I've always noticed is that, like, with both killers and detectives alike, we attribute this level of, like, oh, well, they were so smart. They were like, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, that's not true at all generally. I mean, maybe that's an exception, but like...
Yeah, like a lot of these serial killers are idiots.
Yeah, they're just
get
lucky.
Away with it because of circumstances.
Well, yeah, because they're trying to say, like...
fall through the cracks of society.
They're outsmarting the police, but they're not. The police is just not doing their jobs.
Yeah.
Well, in another aspect of, like, Battle's case, you were talking about, like, it was happening during the crack epidemic, which was just soaking up all the resources for those police departments. Like, I don't care how good your super cops are or whatever you want to call them. Like, you only have so many people and so much money, and the government is telling you got to go deal with the crack epidemic that they caused.
Well, that and the one thing that you were saying about how they found like coke in all these women's systems, like I wonder how true that actually is, or if they're just saying that to kind of like blow it off so that they don't have to investigate,
or to get the public to not care about them so that they can just make it a cold case and forget about it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, remember back in the day, so they cops would like sprinkle crack on dead bodies.
Back in the day, they still plant evidence.
I mean, yeah, they still plant evidence.
Yeah.
Shit ain't sweet. But on that depressing note, that comes to the conclusion of our episode, because we've been talking for a while. But yeah, enjoy the music. Robert, do you have anything to plug?
Nope.
No,
Nope. I don't. Well, when's this going to come out?
probably this week, next week.
Okay, so I'm a part of a band called Freddy versus, like Freddy versus Jason. Just the first half.
Spooky
Freddy
boy
versus
Robert.
Spooky boy.
What do you do in it, Robert?
I perform.
He can't say.
As
State secret.
but I'm also a writer. I help write the music. And we're going to be on Spotify by the end of the month, just in time for haunted Halloween parties. So you should check us out. We're spooky rock music. So think like Chucky, Scream, those sorts of movies, that kind of music. Freddy Versus, you can find us on Spotify, on your Instagram, that kind of stuff.
We'll link some shit. It's all right. We got you, Robert.
It's kind of fun.
Yeah, but K Money, anything to plug?
Nope.
Battle?
No. Drink sparkling water. It tastes good. Ever since Cosmo, I've been buying cases of...
Oh, you fancy.
I drink sparkling water instead of real water because I suck.
And also, I low-key don't trust the pipes in my apartment building.
Neither do I.
So
I have a water purifier, but I still don't like flat water.
But yeah, so
I'm one of those
episode.
people.
Enjoy the music and see you later.
Bye, everyone.
Time now for your latest weather forecast.
Flashback to the day that you went away. You said to see your family, but I ran into you yesterday, and you never saw it coming, baby. I knew you knew what I thought. Did you leave or not? You said that you meant to, but you forgot, and I never saw it coming. Should have been so